Tension is at an all-time high as the drama between Kirk Frost and Kendra Rasheeda continues to develop, with Kendra startling everyone by admitting that she spent the night with Kirk and that the fallout occurred immediately after. What started as a rumor is now evolving into a full-fledged showdown. People are wondering if Kendra is speaking the truth since the tale is catching on like wildfire. The longer the tale circulates, the more doubts are aroused. But Rasheeda, Kirk's wife, is furious and doesn't believe Kendra's charges. She is sure that Kendra is merely attempting to sow trouble. The stakes are higher than ever, emotions are running high, secrets are out. And social media is ablaze as the situation is set to blow up. Who is revealing the truth, and Rasheeda's reaction to the startling disclosures are the only unanswered questions. The next turn of events could completely alter the course of the drama, which is just getting started. Watch closely to see how this bizarre tale develops. Don't miss the startling information that will be disclosed next. Uncertainty weighed heavily on the tension in the air. With her phone in hand, Rasheeda sat in the living room, attempting to come to terms with the truth that had just hit her. Kendra's life was rocked by her message, accusing Kirk of betraying her. She said, "I spent the night with Kirk. He's been lying to you." And the words continued to replay in her mind, evoking fresh feelings of incredulity and rage every time. How did this occur? How could the signs have gone unnoticed? Were now being discussed among their closest friends, in the media, and on social media. Rasheeda never thought that her husband, with whom she had spent so much time creating a life, would be at the center of a crisis that she was not sure how to manage, even if Kirk had been acting distant for weeks. Although she initially didn't think Kendra, who had a track record of stirring up trouble, could possibly be telling the truth. She quietly questioned whether she had actually witnessed her entire world seem to have transformed beneath her feet. And she was no longer sure which way was up. She never thought it would come to this, especially with someone like Kendra Rasheeda. But Kirk had been aloof and secretive, dodging her calls at night and giving nonsensical excuses. She couldn't bring herself to answer her phone when it buzzed. Again, interrupting her thoughts, it was Kirk calling. She was at a loss for words. What could he say to make this all right? Anything that would lessen the pain? His final text message before trying to call again was, "Please, Rashida, it's not what you think. We need to talk." After a few calls went unanswered, he sent Rashida a text message with this straightforward, almost pathetic plea. "Please, Rashida, it's not what you think. We need to talk." Rashida, feeling more and more angry, put the phone down because she didn't know how to even begin talking to him. Kendra's message seemed like the most profound betrayal. It seemed to Rashida that she was losing faith in her spouse, Kirk. What had happened to them? Their family, careers, and everything else they had worked so hard to build were all in jeopardy because of one night that Kirk had spent with Kendra. The betrayal of everything they stood, 4 years of love, trust, and special moments were now in doubt. Was what was hurting Rashida more than the affair. Kirk and their dreams had been the focal point of her life, and it felt as if he had ruined them all in one night. Rasha was embarrassed not only by Kirk's actions, but also by the fact that everyone was now observing her every action. Would everything she had given and worked for be lost in a single thoughtless choice? And was this how it was going to end? She wondered if she would ever be able to forgive him as her thoughts whirled through the alternatives. Nevertheless, the proof was unquestionable. Their unquestionable connection and the discussions Kendra claimed to have had with Kirk seemed to support that. Rashida realized she couldn't just watch helplessly as this destroyed her life, no matter how painful. The hours that followed were a haze of calls, texts, and attempts by friends, family, and even some complete strangers to step in. Was the last straw? Or should she try to patch up their marriage? What would her kids think? Could she let them grow up in a household where nobody could be trusted? The more she thought about it, the more complicated it appeared to get. Many of Kirk's colleagues expressed their sympathy, but their words were unable to lessen the hurt caused by what had transpired. Everyone knew there was no going back when Kirk's treason was made public, but the world continued on. Reactions were all over social media, with some individuals standing up for Kurt, some for Rashida, and yet others questioning Kendra's motives. Supporters of both sides fiercely defended their positions in the intense public response. Everyone had differing ideas on what Kendra's real goals were, what Kirk should do next, and what Rashida should do next. Rashida was supposed to play her role in the show that the world had created out of Kendra's accusations. Rashida needed answers, and she needed to confront Kirk and hear the truth from him, no matter how painful it was. She wasn't interested in the drama or manipulating her feelings. But there was a catch. Kirk wasn't prepared to be completely honest. When Rashida eventually took his call a few hours later, Kirk's voice was tremulous, and he apologized profusely. But Rashida showed little interest. Kirk began almost immediately by saying, "Rashida, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. I should have told you a long time ago that it was a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I never meant to hurt you." Although she could barely hear him, every word he said sounded like an empty apology, a man attempting to save himself rather than take responsibility for what he had done. She needed to hear the whole, unadulterated truth. No more lies, no more secrets. Rashida couldn't help but realize what had happened and how far things had gone, even if it felt like it was tearing her apart. Rashida felt the gap between them deepen when Kirk started talking about his regret, guilt, and self-loathing. He was no longer the man she had imagined him to be. But she still wanted to keep what they had because she had loved him for so long, and it seemed impossible to leave everything they had built together. He kept pleading for forgiveness and providing every explanation he could. But nothing seemed to alter the reality that Rashida had heard enough, and that the trust had been betrayed. He was prepared to face the repercussions of his actions. Had no idea what lay ahead, only that for the first time in a long time, she would have to make a decision. And as unpleasant as that was, there was no other choice. This conflict was no longer only between Kendra and Rashida. Rather, it was a struggle for recovery, dignity, and for Rashida. The days following the shocking disclosure appeared to go on forever. Kendra was still reeling from the shock of her charges, but she was also starting to face the fact that Kirk's treachery was no longer a private affair. It was now a public spectacle, and the pressure from outside voices was getting to be too much for her to bear. Rashida felt as though she was drowning with inquiries and comments, so she was unable to answer her phone when it buzzed nonstop. Although everyone had an opinion, none could relate to the suffering she was going through or the years of love, trust, and dedication she had invested in their relationship, only to see it fail due to Kirk's careless errors. Rashida couldn't bring herself to respond each time she received Kirk's phone calls or texts, which were all apologies and entreaties for forgiveness and expectations. She had been receiving unsolicited advice on how to handle the matter from friends, family, and even complete strangers on social media. Her fury flared again at what he had said. She kept asking herself, how could he do this to me? Which only fueled her rage. He had publicly humiliated her, something she had never requested after she had given him everything. Yet, in spite of her rage, she was unable to let go of the dreams they had shared, the life they had built, and the memories they had shared. Everything seemed to fall apart with each passing moment. Kirk's dishonesty, his avoidance of the truth, and the way he had handled the issue to protect himself were worse than the affair itself. He had lied to her face so many times that it seemed difficult to break the web of dishonesty that remained. After so many years of trusting in him and them, Rashida felt as though their relationship was ruined. Before, Rashida had given Kendra little thought, considering her to be a mere incidental presence in their life. But now, since she was at the center of everything, it could not be avoided. The more Rashida considered it, the more Kendra seemed like an unstoppable force. And the lady who had once been a tiny part of their lives had suddenly become the face of the treachery. Was it merely revenge, or was there anything more she wanted? There was one thing that Rashida couldn't figure out, and to be honest, she didn't want to. Knowing that it would only become worse if Kendra had more to divulge, Rashida felt the weight of that menace looming over her. She was positive that Kendra wasn't finished because of the claims she had made and the videos she had uploaded, which all suggested that she wasn't prepared to give up. She was sitting in her living room when her phone flashed another message from Kirk. She sighed and closed her eyes as she leaned back. She had been trying to ignore the incessant reminder of everything that was going on, but it was impossible. Neither the truth nor her reality could be avoided. Rashida drove to the restaurant where they had decided to meet the following evening. As she parked and went inside, Kirk was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, looking as though he hadn't slept in days. The city was still, and the streets were dimly lit. When she walked closer to him, he looked up, and she briefly realized that she couldn't continue to postpone the encounter indefinitely. Rashida had to make a choice since she realized she couldn't keep escaping this circumstance. She had two options. She could confront the facts directly, or she could keep denying it and pretending nothing was wrong. There was a brief moment of relief as he glimpsed Rashida's face. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Rashida," he murmured quietly as she stood across from him. "I just want to talk." Rashida looked at him with eyes and said, "Explain." She wasn't sure if she could take any more excuses. "I just want to know why, Kendra. Why now?" "There's nothing to explain, Kirk. You've already made your decisions." Kirk's expression dimmed. Even though he seemed like a man who had gone through a lot, Rashida wasn't sure she still felt sorry for him. His voice began to falter. "Kendra just shoved me into it when I made a mistake and became upset. Stop it. I never meant for it to occur. Kirk, I don't want your excuses." Rashida had heard it all before, so she wasn't interested in Kirk's regrets or his guilt, even though his eyes were full of them. She continued, "I've spent years building my life with you," in a voice that was shaking violently. Kirk moved out to hold her hand, but Rashida retracted it. "I gave you everything, Kirk, and you've destroyed it. You've destroyed me. What do you expect me to do?" "How am I supposed to just move on from this?" Kirk said. "I apologize that he repeated in an anguished voice. "Please, I never meant to hurt you." And Rashida stared at him for a long moment. "Rashida, you are loved." The silence between them persisted, and Rashida felt the weight of the decision she had to make, unsure of what the right choice was. "Give me a chance to prove it." She had always believed in their love, but now it felt like a shattered illusion. And she wasn't sure if she could rebuild it, or even if she wanted to. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Kirk," she said, her voice cracking. Kirk begged her to consider their future and try to recreate what they had. But Rashida knew that whatever their future was, it couldn't be the same. As the conversation came to a close without any real resolution, she felt a sense of clarity, though she wasn't sure what it was. As she walked out of the restaurant and back into the cool night air, everyone was watching her every move, waiting to see what decision she would make. Everyone had an opinion, but the only one that mattered was hers, and at the moment, she wasn't sure what the right one was. Rashida felt as though the days that followed were an endless cycle of uncertainty and emotional turmoil. With the weight of everything, Kendra's accusations, Kirk's lies, and the public scrutiny seeming to hang over her like a dark cloud, that wouldn't go away. However, as she tried to regain some control, the reminders of her suffering kept coming back to her. Her phone rang constantly, but she was unable to answer any of the calls, and there were messages from Kirk apologizing for leaving. Rashida had to put herself first, despite the flurry of emotions engulfing her. She had spent so much time putting the needs of others, Kirk, her family, and her career, that she had forgotten who she was and what she truly needed. In addition to the constant stream of comments on social media, where it seemed like everyone had something to say about her life, her marriage, and every move she made, she received messages from friends and supportive people urging her to return home. The public drama was wearing her down. But Rashida wasn't ready to show that weakness because she couldn't let herself break down right now. Not with so many people watching her. She knew she couldn't stay in this toxic environment any longer. She needed to take a step back, take a breath, and find some clarity. She needed to make decisions that were best for herself without worrying about what other people thought of them. The place that had once felt like home had become a continual reminder of everything that had gone wrong, so she made the decision to leave the house for a while. She packed a bag, got her car keys, and drove off into the night without a clear destination in mind. Rashida drove aimlessly, her mind racing with thoughts of Kirk, Kendra, and everything that had happened. And she didn't mind the silence because, for the first time in days, she didn't feel the overwhelming pressure of the world's eyes on her. Eventually, she arrived at the beach, where the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was calming. And she felt a wave of calm wash over her as she got out of the car. The cool ocean breeze lifted her hair and she closed her eyes, allowing that she'd spent so many years trying to please others and keep up appearances. But now, in this quiet, peaceful moment, she realized how far she'd drifted from herself. As she walked along the shore, the weight on her chest seemed to lighten in the salty air. The rhythmic sound of the ocean, and the realization that she'd lost touch with the woman she used to be, the woman who was strong, independent, and unafraid to take control of her life. It wouldn't be easy or happen right away, but she deserved to start over. Later that night, when Rashida checked her phone and saw that Kirk had left her messages, she decided it was time to focus on her career because for so long her identity had been entwined with her relationship with Kirk and being a wife and mother. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to read them because she had heard enough. When Rashida returned to her office the next day, it was strange to be there without Kirk at her side, but she was determined to persevere. And for the first time in a long time, she started to put her all into her work, meeting with her team, and discussing new projects. She felt as though she was doing something for herself. But even with her career taking off again, there was still the question. Rashida had always been a gifted businesswoman, and she had built an empire through her own hard work, but she had let it slip away while balancing the chaos of her personal life. She had thought a lot about what to do about Kirk, and part of her wanted to give him another chance because she knew how much he meant to her and how much they had shared. But the more she thought about the lies, the more she realized that forgiveness would take time, trust could not be restored instantly, and the damage had been done. Rasha met with her lawyer the following week because, whatever happened with Kirk, she knew it was time to start planning for the future. Would look like, but she was confident that she would be okay because she had built a life before Kirk. And now that she had conquered past challenges and always come out stronger, she could build a new one. The lawyer heard some documents to review, and Rashida took some time to think about them. The reality of it all began to set in, and she was making decisions that would change her life. But she also experienced a sudden sense of empowerment because she was making her own decisions and no longer needed advice from others. The power to shape her future while the drama continued. Kendra continued to make headlines, reminding everyone about the affair. And it appeared that she was determined to make Rashida's life as difficult as possible. But Rashida was learning to ignore the noise. Kendra could say whatever she wanted, but it didn't change the fact that Rashida was now in control of her life. And she began focusing on what mattered most to her children, her career, and her peace of mind. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone or win Kirk's approval. She was all ready. Rashida became more confident in her decision to proceed as the days went by. She was uncertain of what was ahead, but she was no longer scared of it. She was ready to take the next step, whatever it might be. It was not about anger or revenge, but rather about reclaiming her own identity. She had no idea what her journey would bring next. But she was certain that she would not let anyone control her life any longer. She was the one in charge now, and she was determined to build a future on her own terms. The days following Rashida's decision to take control of her life felt like a quiet metamorphosis. She wasn't sure where the path ahead would lead her, but one thing was certain: she wasn't just reacting to the chaos around her. Rather, she was moving forward with the resolve to shape her future on her own terms. Kirk, on the other hand, seemed to be sinking deeper and deeper into regret. His constant attempts to get in touch with her only made things worse. Each time he did, Rasha's resolve grew stronger because he had betrayed her trust. And no matter how many times he apologized, the damage had, even though her trust in him had been damaged and could not be repaired by merely saying the right words. There was still a part of her that felt the weight of their previous relationship, even though Rashida knew that the good times, their shared history, and the family they had built together couldn't completely erase what he had done. The affair wasn't just a betrayal. It was a betrayal of everything they had promised each other, and that couldn't be forgotten. It wasn't the first time she had been put to the test, and it most certainly wouldn't be the last. But this time she wasn't going to let that stop her from giving her all at work. Rashida had always been passionate about her businesses, and now that passion was her escape. She started planning for the future, new projects, partnerships, and collaborations. Rashida knew she had to focus on growth. As the weeks passed, she felt stronger because she had already been through a lot. The divorce papers were on the table, ready for review. Rashida had not yet made a decision, but she was getting closer. The idea of leaving her marriage was terrifying, but it also seemed even worse to stay in a relationship based on lies. She sat there looking at the papers. Rashida realized something important. It wasn't just about leaving Kirk. It was about moving on from the past. Rashida let herself be pulled down by uncontrollable circumstances until she met with her lawyer. Again, one afternoon, Rashida took a deep breath, feeling that this was the version of her marriage where everything was perfect and unbreakable. But in reality, it had never been that way. Every relationship had its ups and downs, but trust was the foundation that held everything together. Without trust, there was nothing left to build on. It was the hardest thing she had done in a long time, but in that moment, she knew it was the right decision. She was no longer going to wait for Kirk or the world to decide her worth. For the first time in months, Rashida felt free to be herself, rediscover who she was, and rebuild her life without being defined by the mistakes of others. Her phone buzzed again as she was leaving the lawyer's office, this time from Kendra, of all people. She hesitated for a moment, but then took a deep breath and decided to open the message. "I know things are messy right now, Rashida, but I want to be clear, I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm just telling the truth. I didn't ask for this either." Rashida put the phone down, her anger slowly waning as she realized that she couldn't change the past. But she could control the future for the next few weeks. Rashida didn't respond immediately because she wanted to send Kendra a harsh message back to lash out at her for everything she had triggered. But she decided against it because it wouldn't help the situation. Kendra had already made her decision, and Rashida had to make her own. It wasn't about her anymore. She didn't need anyone's approval to move forward. She had built her life on her own, and now she was going to rebuild it on her terms. Time went by swiftly. While Rashida continued to focus on her businesses, she also started to set aside time for herself, to relax, to think, and to reconnect with the things that made her happy. Kirk was still trying to salvage their relationship, sending messages of apology and forgiveness, but Rashida had reached when the day finally came. Rashida called Kirk and said, "I'm done. I can't do this anymore." Kirk tried to talk her out of it, but Rashida had already decided and had doubted herself for too long. She had reached a point where she knew that no amount of apology could fix what had been done. She had given it, her all for him. For the first time in a long time, Rashida felt at peace since she was choosing herself this time rather than letting him decide her happiness. As the days passed, Rashida began to feel a sense of closure for the first time. In months, she felt like she was finally at peace, even though she had no idea what lay ahead. The storm had passed, and although Rashida will always bear the scars, she knew she could handle whatever happened next. And no one could take away the fact that she had reclaimed her life. Rashida's journey has been incredibly turbulent, filled with treachery and heartbreak, and ultimately in her quest for self-discovery. She has faced and surmounted unimaginable challenges. Her brave decision to move on, her resilience, her perseverance, and her commitment to beginning anew are proof that, despite the journey's seeming gloom, there is always light ahead. The question is,